All right, guys, the first thing I need is everyone to mute. Please mute. And if you have any questions, I need you to message them to me, please. And what I'll do is as they come in, Dave's over here, he'll look at them as well, and we'll kind of put them in buckets because we don't have all the time in the world today, so I want to get the best themes possible. But here we go, we're starting. Can you tell, am I recording? I am, okay. Okay, here we go, guys. I want to just give this really big kickoff. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. I'm super stoked about this. For those people that don't know, Dr. Moran has been a lifesaver for me. She has been literally, well, Dave can even attest to this. She has been my person. And since I've seen her for a couple of years, I can't even tell you all of the nuggets that I've gotten from it to help me cope. Whether it was through depression or feeling like I couldn't even go on. Literally, she is giving me a lot of tools. She is a clinical psychologist. She's practiced for over 20 years. She's seen everything. And not only has she helped me as a person who's trying to get somewhere, but I can't even tell you how much I respect her. And I was so excited when I even had the thought of putting her onto our community so you guys could see her. So this is Dr. Diane Moran, and we are going to chat a little bit about fear, anxiety, and everything that's going on. So please, if you have questions, please direct message them to me. But we are going to get started. You ready, Dr. Moran?
I certainly am. I'm a little overwhelmed by that intro, but very kind.
All true, all true. So the first thing I just want to talk about really fast, and I know we've chatted so much over the past couple minutes and however long we've seen each other, but let's chat about why we feel, well, one, where fear comes from, because it does have a purpose. And in this state, when there's so much unknown, what it can do to help us, or what can we do so it doesn't cripple us, I guess. But let's go with the origins of fear, I guess.
Absolutely. So yes, you're right. Fear is a very constructive emotion and response oftentimes. So, here we are in the midst of this really strange, unfamiliar time. And this coronavirus thing that we're dealing with is a complete unknown, or at least was, okay? And in many ways, we're wired to fear the unknown, because not fearing the unknown could be very dangerous. So until we know what a thing is, what it's going to do, how we manage it, whether we can be safe with it, it's reasonable to be fearful, right? So imagine if our brains weren't able to experience fear. And one of the things I think about is, I don't know if you're familiar, there are people in this world who are unable to feel pain. Yes, 1 in a million people is unable to feel pain because the communication that is supposed to go to our brains to tell us this is a painful thing doesn't happen. And for those people, they suffer awful injuries and often die young because of those. And I think of that parallel of, what if our brains did not have the capacity to feel fear? I suspect we probably wouldn't have made it past the first generation as a species, So without the ability to feel fear, we'd never escape danger. And the most primitive part of our brain was really built to experience fear, and you used this term with me, Lauren, lizard brain, and I think a lot of people are kind of hearing this and talking about it now, that is sort of, the base of our brain. The rest of it grows around us, or around that. But that lizard brain is wired to keep us safe, and to keep lizards safe, by the way. And it's all about avoiding danger. So there's a well-known neuropsychologist, Rick Hansen, who talks about this. And a lot of what I'm talking about today is sort of based on his stuff. But he says, fear is the thing that kept our ancestors from becoming lunch. For the tiger hiding in the bushes. The problem with fear and the way we think is that we make errors. Okay, so sometimes fear is absolutely accurate. At other times, it's not. So medical researchers, statistical researchers have terms for that. So false positive errors or type 1 errors. That's when, hey, I think there's a tiger in that bush over there, just 10 feet away, and I'm sweating, I'm shaking, I start running faster than I've ever run in my life. Turns out that was the friendly neighborhood kitten. But I mistook it for a tiger, and now my heart is racing and I am short of breath and I cannot calm down. That's a type 1 error, okay? Type 2 errors or false negatives, that's when I hear rustling over in that bush and I think, oh, that's just that friendly neighborhood cat. Turns out it's the biggest, fastest tiger and I didn't do what I needed to do to keep myself safe. And now there's a very happy tiger, okay? So part of the problem is we want our fear to always be accurate, and it's not. And oftentimes when it's not, we start feeling really overwhelmed by that fear because it's driven by something else, So our tendency is to default to that first type of error of there's danger when there's not, because that's the thing that's going to keep us alive, okay? That's not to say that there aren't people that make the other type of errors. I would say that probably plays into the whole Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest, because if you keep making that second type of error where you don't see danger where there really is danger, you're not going to last long. Okay. So if you think about how to apply all of that to sort of this current COVID-19 situation, a lot of us have felt really terrified. What is this thing? And we've kicked into overdrive with catastrophic thinking, I guess what some people might call doom and gloom thinking. We're all going to die. The world's never going to recover. There's not going to be enough toilet paper. So, those things that make us really tense up and get anxious. Other people have made the other error, very cavalier, underestimating the ability of this virus to, wreak havoc left unchecked. And they've not taken reasonable steps or measures, or not done so fast enough. And I think of, people who would say, oh, this isn't such a big deal, or it's just like the flu, without knowing. So it's just a way of dismissing young people, oh, it's not going to affect me. I'm good. I don't have to worry about this.
I have a question on that. Do you think the response is, so I guess my question is, how do you override it's almost like from an emotional intelligence, they'll say irrational versus rational fear, right? They'll say a rational fear is being you're in the water and a great white shark is right behind you. You have every right to be scared. And irrational fear is being scared of something that you don't have a shark chasing you. So having that, moment doesn't make sense at the time. But are some of those people overriding that wiring that we have had for so long? Or is that just a default? They just make that second error?
I would say that some people, just in terms of personality, I refuse to be afraid. I'm not going to let anything get the better of me. Well, sometimes you should.
Right. Like there are things to be fearful of.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think, honestly, other people are kind of hardwired to be more anxious, or they've lived lives where they have experienced, significant trauma. And so their tendency towards reactivity and their sensitivity to danger is higher than other people's. So we're not all the same,
right,
in that way.
Can I hold on?
Yeah.
If you want to keep continuing, because I was going to ask you to
Oh, go ahead.
distinguish. Well, just the conversation we had before everyone jumped on, just so people can get an idea of where they're at. You mentioned to me how you can tell if someone is suffering from more depressive thoughts or more anxious thoughts. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, so I was saying to Lauren that, and this is just anecdotal, I haven't seen any research about this, but typically if I'm sitting in a session with somebody and I hear them making a lot of references to the past, that to me is generally an indicator that this is a person who may be struggling with depression, stuck in regret, the things that they can't go back and change or undo. And, they're having a hard time just being here and letting that lie. When I hear somebody talking a lot about the future, and that often comes, and in fact, I was going to talk about some of this in the form of what if thoughts. Well, what if this happens? What if that doesn't happen? That is always anxiety. It's the desire to want to be able to control future outcomes and to think that by running through these scenarios, we're going to be able to do that. We're going to keep bad things from happening to us because we've prepared. And what you and I were talking about is how much wasted energy goes into that. So, we're sitting in the past, or we're, stewing about the future. And what we're missing is, if I look around me right now, I'm fine. I'm safe. I have what I need. I have people that care about me. What am I fretting about?
If I'm laughing right now because Dave's laughing, because that's like so me. Like I literally, when I came and saw you 2 years ago, I thought we would be homeless on the street right now with no one to help us. And here it is a couple years later and we're okay.
Here you are.
Yes, totally. So he's literally like snickering and I'm like, stop. But so what, I know we're wired to default to fear, but what is that has that grip on us so tight that makes us worry about what's going to happen in 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now? Where is that strictly rooted in fear and the keeping us alive, or is there other parts at play?
Well, I think fear is sometimes about keeping us alive, but let's face it, these days, except for our current circumstances, our fear is not usually about keeping ourselves alive. The threats are different now. I think you and I talked about this at another point in time where, the threats might be economic threats, or, oh my goodness, is my child going to get the education that he or she needs to succeed in this world? So the anxiety is not always danger these days. It's
no, go ahead.
Psychological danger.
Psychological danger. So can you explain that? Explain that for me.
Sure. So, I think when we talk about lizard brain, we're talking about physical danger. Lizards aren't thinking about, how am I going to pay for my son's education? They're thinking about escaping. We're not operating there. We've got a lot bigger brain than that. And fortunately, that gives us all kinds of talents and abilities that lizards don't have. But it also gives us the power to get stuck in our thoughts. And when I talk about psychological dangers, I'm talking about those things that we perceive or define as danger. And they're very individualistic. So what you consider dangerous, I may not. And what I consider threatening, you may think is silly. So
how do you, when you're in this cycle, it's like a vicious cycle, right?
oh,
Because
absolutely.
you worry about the future, then you get physical ailments. I mean, it's true. People get nauseous, they have pain. There's things that come along with having all of this anxiety. Yet you think that, then you feel worse, then you feel worse, and then you continue to think the future is going to be just, there's looking like there's no hope.
Right.
So what are your thoughts, steps to help us get out of that?
Where do you interrupt that process?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So your reference to, those fears about the future and thinking about the future makes us sick. That's a very real thing. So when we're feeling a lot of anxiety and fear, there are chemical reactions going on in our bodies. Okay. We are pumping things like adrenaline and cortisol, and there's all kinds of research about the effects of those things on our body, particularly chronic high levels of cortisol lead to inflammation, which contributes to heart disease and diabetes and you name it. Okay. So when you're feeling sick and you're not sure where that's coming from, pay attention to, where have I been in my thoughts lately? And I'm going to tell you, your thoughts is, your thinking is the primary place where you interrupt this process. So really, there are particular kinds of thoughts that I think we can see as associated with anxiety. So the tendency, I think I used this word earlier, to catastrophize, okay? It's going to be the most horrific thing possible. So it's not that I might struggle or that might be a little difficult. It's going to be impossible. It's going to, do me in, and I'm never going to recover from that, okay? That is hallmark thinking of anxiety. Yes. Oh, you have some of those?
Yes, I do.
Most of us do.
That's good to know.
Oh, yeah. Again, none of us gets to escape this stuff entirely,
Okay.
but some of us experience a lot more of it than others.
I think that's a huge point. I would love to bring up a quote that, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to say exactly, but someone basically said, if you're so self-centered that you think nothing bad is ever going to happen to you, or you're not going to have stuff to deal with, like every person has shit to deal with.
Absolutely.
So I think that but like, it seems for whatever reason, people are so nervous to say it. I mean, Dave had to call you for me because I just wouldn't talk about it out loud. It's so funny. People just think I'm the only one, or everyone else seems to be managing totally fine, because you get glimpses, and that's just not reality.
Which is funny, because the next kind of thinking I was going to mention is sort of the reverse of that. And that's the tendency to over-personalize. So yes, we can get very self-focused in either of those directions. So for some of us, it's that sense of, oh, if something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen to me,
Right.
Without recognizing, like, oh, wait, that's happening to all kinds of other people as well. And they're getting through it. And if they can get through it, I'll bet I can get through it too. Right. It's not that you have been singled out for, this awful thing, and everybody else is doing just fine. So that's a kind of thinking that is characteristic of anxiety. The what if thoughts, I always talk about as that. If you hear yourself starting a sentence with what if, you know that you are going down the pathway to anxiety. That I cannot think of a time when I have heard a statement start with that and it's been a positive kind of.
Right.
Like
we were chatting about right before everyone jumped on, we always go to the worst case scenario, which comes back to us erring on the side of caution. We had mentioned that the amount of times people say, well, I'm going to prepare for this. I'm going to prepare for the worst, because then if it doesn't happen, I'll be okay.
Yes.
But realistically, how often does the worst happen, and how much stress have you put on yourself for that whole amount of time? That's got to be more dangerous than, or maybe not great. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Because the other thing that we're doing in that situation is we are completely underestimating our ability to cope. So we have to prepare for this so that it doesn't catch us by surprise. And what we forget is, things have happened in my past that if you had told me I was going to have to deal with that, I would have told you I couldn't. And yet I did.
Right.
But when we're thinking into the future, we imagine we will not be able to cope with that. And the reality is we rise to the occasion. We deal with what we have to deal with, because in the moment we don't have a choice. But we spend all this energy sort of front loading for things that never happen.
It's well, something Dave asks me all the time. I'll let everybody here know. I think everybody knows I struggle with anxiety, and which is funny because I can step on a ball field and think I'm invincible, and certain things in life I feel like I'm just not even going to make it. So, I just lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, okay, hold on. I do have a question. Sorry, totally lost my train of thought. Do you have a choice in what to think?
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
So that's what I said. If you're going to interrupt these cycles, I often talk about, and this is a common model in psychology, that if you take 3 points of a triangle, okay, and point A is affect. In other words, emotion, feeling. Point B is behavior, or the things we do, or even situations we find ourselves in. Point C, cognitions, thoughts, self-talk. If you want to change what's going on in that cycle, because those things all affect each other, whatever you're feeling is going to affect the choices that you make in terms of your actions. What you're feeling is going to affect how you're thinking, okay? How you're thinking is going to affect how you're feeling. If you want to shift how you're feeling, you cannot will yourself out of that. That's the common misnomer. Just snap out of it, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That doesn't work. But what you can do is you can change behavior and you can change thinking. Oftentimes, we fail to see that we have the ability to change our thoughts because we're not conscious about what we're thinking.
Yeah, talk to me about that, like how we, explain that, that we don't even realize. Are we too stuck in our emotion? Are we too stuck as an emotion, or?
I think of it as watching CNN. So if you've ever watched CNN, and I'm sure there are other channels that do this too, you have the talking head on the screen, and then you've got that ticker running down at the bottom, all the latest news. And you're watching the head, but it's amazing how much of what's running down at the bottom you're taking in.
Yeah.
Right? So in our day-to-day lives, I'm focused on, getting my study cleaned up and in order. But the whole time my head is going in the background.
Yep.
The other way you might think about it is a computer. What are the processes running in the background of a computer? You might be looking at this program, but there's other stuff going on. and you're not paying attention to that stuff, but it's making the computer run.
Yep.
Okay. There's so much unconscious thinking. You know, if I stopped you at any moment in time and said, tell me what you're thinking right now, you might be surprised to realize what you're thinking.
Right.
Okay. So part of the trick is becoming more conscious about that, the awareness that we are always engaged in thought. Some of that thought can be very constructive, you know, we're problem solving something. Some of that thought or thinking can be very destructive. You know, oh, I can't believe I failed at that. I'm always failing. You're not saying it out loud, but it's playing.
Yep.
Okay. So a lot of those, again, the what if thoughts, the catastrophic thoughts, we're not going to make it through this, you know, fuels our anxiety at the point that we become conscious of, oh, I need to stop. I'm feeling really anxious. I need to stop. You know, I was listening to that talk and they were talking about certain kinds of thoughts. Am I having any of those thoughts right now? You know, am I doing the what ifs? Am I telling myself that stories about what the outcome of all this is going to be, even though I don't really know?
Right.
Oh, yeah, I am. Okay, I can stop. One of the things that I find helpful to have people do sometimes is to take those anxious thoughts and to just dump them on one side of a page. So here's all the stuff that's making me feel anxious. I'm wondering if we, you know, are ever going to be able to recover economically from this. I don't think we will. The other side of the page is the rational thought, the response to that. So this is reactive kind of brain. This is responsive brain. Responsive brain says, well, I don't really know what it's going to be unless I have some abilities that I should be making money. You know, I don't know what that future is going to be. Yes, clearly I'm fearful about what it might be, but it might not be that either. I can't know. I can focus on today.
And that's all you can do.
And there's this relief that comes, you know, like I stopped that thought and I challenged it. I did it gently, but I challenged it.
Yep.
And I feel like I can breathe again.
No, it's interesting. So Dr. Moran, I haven't actually talked to you about this. Well, you know everything that I've been doing because I see you often, but that's one thing we actually just did with our TrAk fam was we did like a week of meditation, mainly so you can just like learn to observe your thoughts because I've said this a ton, but feel your feelings, but don't become the emotion. I mean, if I could put that into practice, we'd be golden. But you know, feel the feeling, don't become the emotion. But so writing things down on a piece of paper. Would you say meditation would be a good?
Oh, absolutely. I think I've got 16 or 17 things that I can suggest
Let's
that
go.
we do during this time of high stress. You know, so for so many people, I've talked to a few people who, you know, this has been good. They're home. They're removed from stressful environments. They don't have kids at home. They're relaxing. They're actually kind of enjoying this. But by and large, people are highly stressed right now. They're trying to work from home. A lot of employers are like, well, you're home. I need to make sure you're working. And so it's even more intense. At the same time, they're trying to parent kids full time and be their teachers. Oh, you know that experience.
We have a couple teachers watching right now. You're angels, saints, angels.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's economic stress. There's being cut off from our family and friends. There's the worry about, you know, people who are close to us that may be vulnerable. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So the demands are high, the rewards are not great right now, but there are definitely things we can do. And these are things we can do during this time, but these are things that we can do generally,
Right,
to manage stress. Right now, though, this first one, and this is probably true most of the time, but particularly now, limiting your news intake.
yes. Yes.
Um,
Okay, wait, can you address this really fast? Because we've said that a million times.
yes,
The people will say to us, but I need to know what's going on.
yes,
And I'm like, I get it, but pick one.
yes, precisely. And please pick one that, as much as possible, is just fact-based. You know, it's not the overly emotional kind of let's get you riled up kind of news. It's, here are the facts, here are the steps that we're taking, here are the steps that you can take. That's the kind of news we need. And we do need that news. I agree. But we need 15 minutes of that news a day. You know, things don't change that much from one day to the next.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've got people who are telling me they're watching the news 3-4 hours a day. And not surprisingly, they're not doing well.
I was going to say, no wonder they're stressed. I would be stressed.
Absolutely. Or they just have it. This was always true with my parents. You go in their house and the TV is always on, you know?
Yeah.
So even if you're not sitting watching it, you hear it. It's playing in the background. You know, turn it off.
Well, it's like the ticker you're talking about. Even if you don't think you're thinking about it, you're somehow managing to take it in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are not in any particular order. So ask away. The next one I have, honestly, is just doing some gentle stretching, because we carry tension in our bodies. Okay. We walk around with our shoulders up to our ears and we clench our stomachs, and relax your body. And stretching is one of the best ways you can do that. And honestly, if you've got kids at home, get them to do this with you. You know, make this part of your daily routine.
Ironically, we're having a kids yoga and breathing specialist coming in starting next week. Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So one thing that my mental performance coach for Team Canada had us do, she had us tense our whole body for like 5 to 10 seconds to get the feeling. And then her whole point was she needed us to learn what it felt like to relax. So I'm only saying that because that was really helpful, because you can walk around all day and not even realize that you're tense until you have the distinct feeling of tense to not tense.
Right.
So we would do these things, and you would sit and just clench everything that you possibly have, and then like hold it, and then just relax. And then you got that almost the relief feeling of knowing what that's like. And her whole goal was to have you identify, because like you said, you walk around and like you get nervous or something, you hear something that makes you stressed, and all of a sudden your shoulders go up a little more. But sometimes things are so gradual, you don't realize you're in this ball. So I just wanted to, I don't know if you.
No, that's actually, I'm glad you talked about that. It's called progressive muscle relaxation. And you can probably find this somewhere on the internet, an app or something, where they take you through that. And what they actually do is you either start at your feet or start at your head, and you do specific muscle groups. And you tense that muscle group for 5-10 seconds, and then you relax it, so that you become familiar with the particular places in your body that you carry stress.
Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So great exercise.
I don't know the whys behind it, except for the very blanketed, like you need to be able to recognize what it is like to feel to relax. But other than that, I'm like, it's great.
You got it.
All right. So, okay, stretching. What's next?
So follow up to that, if possible, get some real exercise, something to burn off that anxious energy. Truly moving some of that out of our bodies, using some of that adrenaline and cortisol in the process of exercise helps us to not be just storing it up. Okay. So if you can get some aerobic exercise in, there's all kinds of research about the positive effects of exercise on the brain in reducing anxiety and reducing depression. So
Can I just add one thing to that? Because,
please.
well, everybody knows, like, we love our exercise. And we just heard this quote, and it basically, it's to everybody that doesn't have that much time. Do what you can, even in the amount of time that you have. And the analogy was, if you had no gas, would you not fill up your tank if you had to go somewhere? A quarter of a tank? Or would you just say, well, I can't fill it up all the way to full, so I'm just not going to fill up my tank? And I thought that was such a good analogy. Like, no,
Yes.
if you need to go somewhere and you only have $10 and it costs you 40 to fill up your tank, you're going to use that $10. So if you don't have your hour, that's fine. If you have 15 minutes, use that 15 minutes. You don't want to throw it completely out just because you can't get all or nothing. So I just want to throw that out there.
That is perfect. And that leads right into my next thing, which was that we really need to cut ourselves some slack right now. We are under a high level of stress. Some people are managing so many things. So I was going to say exactly that. If you can only exercise for 5-10 minutes, exercise for 5-10 minutes. You don't have to do it all perfectly. You don't have to do the hour workout.
Where does that expectation come from? Because I actually was just writing a post for my Strong Mom group, and Dave mentioned to me, he's like, why do you have this expectation of yourself? I mean, I got a message from my kid's teacher that I'm missing like 10 assignments on one kid, 2 assignments on another kid. I don't even know where to find it. I didn't even know it was there. I realized we didn't do any of our PE because like I also didn't see that, and I'm like hammering myself because I don't have all of that done. And with work, it's really hard to school and do work. And then I'm like, we're eating, not as well as we normally do. And I'm just like going to bed feeling defeated. But what, like,
well, you've got a whole list of ways that you're failing, huh?
Oh my.
Don't we all?
After this, Dr. Moran. But like, where does that expectation come from? Ourselves?
At this point, yes. But we learned that early on. What do we communicate to our kids is expected of them? I'd like to think that we're better at that these days because we're more aware of that pressure. But we get that message. We start getting that message at a very young age of you've got to make the grades and and if you don't do those things, you're not going to have the life you're supposed to have. And so the idea of failure, talk about danger.
Yeah.
Failing,
okay.
yeah. Can lead us down a path that makes us unsafe.
That's essentially what it is, right? I think like I'm ruining my kid's, he's in 3rd grade. I think I'm ruining his life because he doesn't have these assignments in him. Dave's like, don't worry, he's not going to go on his application.
You're responsible for that. Yes.
Okay. So just be gentle on yourself. I mean, especially now, I mean, who's ever come up in a situation like this? Like there's no playbook.
Correct.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Easy or simple, not easy, Dr. Moran. Simple, not easy.
Right. Yeah, this is new to all of us. None of us knows how to do this well. We're just figuring out how to do it.
Right.
Okay.
All That's right. Actually good. Okay, next.
Okay. When the snow stops, and it's actually spring, like it was a day last week, invite people to come be with you at a safe distance. Many of us have porches or decks, or, we can go to the park and sit apart and have real human contact without touching.
It's social connection, right? Like
Yes. And in lieu of that, obviously using these kinds of platforms for virtual human connection. Yeah. A lot of people, I think, are just getting really cut off, so I can't see anybody. So I'm just in these 4 walls and I feel like I'm climbing these 4 walls.
So it's funny. One of our weeks today for TrAk was connection. Reach out to 2 people that otherwise you normally wouldn't, not necessarily the people you talk to all the time, because you know you're going to message them.
Right.
But I know personally, it's that gradually, then suddenly. Like you don't see people and it doesn't feel good. And then all of a sudden you're just feeling really down. And it's not, it's like you don't even know when it happened, but you know that lack of seeing people and having that connection, but you don't realize it at the time. It's just all of a sudden you wake up just heavy.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Invite people over at a safe distance.
Correct. Yeah, people are being very creative. It's really wonderful to watch that right now. So keep that up. Get more sleep. So, you know, during this time when everybody's doing everything, I think sometimes people are feeling like I don't have time to sleep. I've got to get my kids taken care of. I've got to get work taken care of. When we're in periods of high stress, we don't need less sleep. We need more sleep. I think part of the problem right now is because we're not moving as much, because our minds are restless and anxious, people are having a lot of restless sleep, even unpleasant dreams. So really kind of prepare yourself for sleep. Read a pleasant book before you go to bed, with the idea that you're gonna be engaged with that as you fall asleep, or, you know, enjoy a program you like. Something that when you get in bed, you are intentionally focusing on, that is not all of this, okay? But make sure you're giving yourself enough room to get enough sleep.
I keep cutting you off, and I know we
No,
don't
that's
have
okay.
that much more time left. So ironically, Dave and I started doing counting your wins at night. And honestly, it's that whole thing. It takes forever for a forest to grow in one match to light it all on fire. And it's so easy to dwell on the negatives. And when we finally started writing, like not like literally the act of writing helps you, you know, actually understand it or feel it a little bit more, or that's how it feels for me.
Yes.
But we started writing the wins, and something that's really little, you know, like just me being able to write down family dinner and then, you know, family game night and all the little things that, you know, we're able to donate 3 more meals to workers that otherwise get lost in the shuffle, because it's just kind of like, you don't pay much attention to the good things, but you can sit there and dwell on the negative. So that's just something that Dave and I have started doing, and there's no wins too small. Like honestly, sometimes if I write, I didn't eat the whole tub of ice cream, I only ate half. The whole tub was there. That's an option, and I didn't eat it all. And sometimes that's what it is. And I think just on that, you go to bed, because you were talking previously about your subconscious, and how when you go to bed, like your brain doesn't stop. And so when you go to bed with those anxious thoughts, it's almost like grooving into your brain.
Yes.
Am I even close there?
Oh, you are so close. So again, you're going right back to some of the stuff from Rick Hansen, who talks about we actually create these, and he refers to them as grooves in our brains, these neural pathways that we kind of dig over and over again. And he refers to it as our tendency to be Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. So we take the negative and we replay it over and over again. You know, we over remember the negative stuff because we feel like either we need to learn something from it, or somehow playing it back is going to keep us from making the same mistake again. And the good stuff that happens, we just kind of go like, oh yeah, that was really nice. And we never come back to it again.
No, it's a slip and slide. It's literally like comes in, slip and slide, gone.
So I love that you and Dave are doing that at night, because that's exactly, you're trying to be Velcro for the positive.
You're trying. And the question came in, why do people mostly focus on the negative? Is that just the fear?
We have a negativity bias, and it is tied to that anxiety. Absolutely.
everyone, not everyone, but generally speaking.
Generally speaking.
We have a negativity bias.
Yes.
Okay.
We tend to over remember it, over focus on it. We kind of scan our environments for the negative stuff, the bad stuff. Yeah, we're not looking for the good stuff.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I know you don't have much time, so maybe 2 more.
Oh, I'm fine. But watching the tendency to overeat and overdrink right now. I'm hearing this from a lot of people. So be careful with that without being too hard on yourself.
Hold on. So I'm just going to let everybody know here. I swear, Dr. Moran and I have not talked about even what we're going to talk about, because the thing that we're doing with our gym right now, our tagline is "Don't stuff, don't starve." So I'm like, this is like almost weird, but no, it's true. Like that's exactly what you said. Like, don't stuff, don't starve. That's also difficult.
Mm-hmm.
One, we're eating foods a lot of people don't normally eat because that fear of going to the grocery store and not knowing what's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's what hit me. I'm glad you said that, because that's what we said. Don't stuff, don't starve.
Yes. Just in addressing, I know there was a question about sort of this days running into each other and kind of losing track of life. It almost feels surreal.
Yeah, so for everyone that doesn't know, I know the person on here that asked that is because I see her name. But there was basically a question of, the first couple weeks is kind of like, okay, this is okay. And then now we're at a point where it's lasted long enough. You don't know what day it is. And for people who are used to getting up, they're go-getters, they do their thing. So now all of a sudden we'll be okay, we're fine. Now they're getting weary. It's draining to not even know what day it is and how to kind of bust out of that. So yeah, so chat about that.
Mm-hmm. So there's a few things that I think can be helpful for that. Honestly, interestingly enough, they do this with patients who have dementia because they don't have that orientation. And right now, I think we're all a little disoriented. When you get up in the morning, look at the calendar. If you have people in your household, do this together. What day of the week is it? What's the date? Let's look at the weather. Let's remind ourselves. Are there important dates coming up? Is there anything significant about this date? So just really centering yourself in time. I really recommend getting outside, having your feet planted on the ground. So great if you can go for a walk, but if you can't do that, just step outside your door and stand on the ground. Not cement, ground, okay? It's really important to maintain a daily routine. So go to bed at the same time roughly every night, get up at the same time roughly every morning. You have a morning routine. We are so at loose ends right now, and our life is so different than what it was that we have to construct those routines and construct them for other people in our lives as well. If we've got kids at home, you have to do that for them. That gives us predictability. Which makes things feel less surreal. I was remembering as a kid, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I just remember like Mondays was laundry day, Tuesdays was house cleaning, the meals, that was the Wednesday night meal and the Thursday night, we knew what was happening. And so doing that on a daily basis, but also sort of having that weekly kind of calendar can help with that. And maybe Tuesdays is we're going to do virtual visits to the national parks. That's fine. But just define what those days are going to be. So you have that. So that's kind of the grounding stuff. I was going to say, take 10 minutes a day for meditation, prayer, however you think about that. It actually, all the research about the brain cells, it actually grows brain cells. You have more brain cells if you meditate daily, and those brain cells decrease our reactivity. They increase our focus. One of the programs I'm doing currently, there's a website called Sounds True. And there are 2 psychologists doing a meditation program on there. It's a 40-day meditation program, about 10 minutes a day. It's a free program. Great thing to do before bed or first thing in the morning.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The other thing is taking time to sort of create positive emotions, so going around the table and telling your favorite story or watching a comedy. The fact that all these movies popped up on these streaming channels, Contagion, and it's like, okay, none of us needs that. Okay, we need to feel positive feelings. And then I was just going to end with really, most of all, being gentle and compassionate with ourselves, being tolerant and compassionate with others, because for the most part, we're all doing the best we can at this point.
That's so true. It's the generous in assumptions.
Yes,
I
love that phrase.
Yeah, like we're all doing the best we can. And if someone doesn't message you back, it's not because they don't want to. There's so much going on, and just being generous and gentle in your assumptions of others and of course of yourself, which again is easier said than done, but it's so important. I just have a couple questions. Can you re-say that meditation site?
Sounds True.
Sounds True. I'm just going to put it right here. Sounds True.
Yeah, and the psychologist doing it, names might be familiar to some folks. It's Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield.
Okay. Oh.
Okay.
And then I just have, do you have like a quick, okay, well, here's a quick. Anxiety or disorders seem more commonplace today. Do you think we're more anxious, or do you think it was just woefully undiagnosed or underdiagnosed historically?
Both.
Both.
So I think, first of all, we are probably more psychologically minded and aware than we were in the past. And so, yes, we see things more clearly around that. But I also think we live in a society now that just fuels fear. You look at our news sources, it's what they operate on. If I can feed you 24-hour-a-day fear, you're going to stay hooked. And then there are all the pressures. You think about, like, seriously, the thing about, like, is my kid going to get into the best college? I better start them in the right preschool. And I need to sign them up at age 1.5 for that, because that's their whole future. We put so much pressure on ourselves that anxiety feels almost inescapable these days. And there was an article, I know it was within the last 2 years, in the New York Times, that was talking about the levels of anxiety among late teens, early 20s, and the prevalence of anxiety disorders for that age group, because there's so much pressure.
That's nerve-wracking as having small kids. Grace will be 11 as our oldest. And this is my last question, which feeds into that a little bit. Do you have any advice on how to help our kids cope with isolation? Because it is so, and I don't even know, I know everyone has their different areas, and but it's funny, adults understand. It might drag us and make us upset, but we understand that we have to do this and not see friends. Right. Kids don't have that ability to understand, and it is so important for them. Do you have any thoughts on how to help our kids cope with isolation?
I mean, certainly setting them up to do things like this with their friends can be helpful. But of course, kids don't have conversations so much like this. So maybe even playing a game together virtually. Again, if you can be creative and find ways to have your kid get together with their best friend, but it's a game where they stay apart, and there's adult supervision to help them with that, that's great. Outside the home, doing that in safe ways. Yeah, this is not something that kids can really wrap their heads around, because, and we talked about this before, this is that invisible thing. It's like, why are we all doing this? nothing looks any different to most of us.
Isn't that funny? You think of a pandemic and you think of something crazy and you picture like you can't go out of your house because there's orange particles flying around.
Right.
But that's not, like, you wake up and you look out your window and it looks similar to what any other day would be.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know if other people have had this experience, but I'll go out walking and there's somebody coming towards you. And it's that weird thought of like, oh yeah, one of us has to cross the street. Normally I would just say hi, and now we say hi from a distance, but it's fun to kind of watch the, okay, who's going to move? And
yeah, Dave jokes, he's like, okay, I'm just going to play chicken and see how long they'll walk towards me and then be like, oh, it's my turn to move.
I said, walking in the neighborhood I live in, I said, it's like playing a game of Pac-Man.
Yeah, totally.
You go and you turn the corner and, oh, nope, can't go that way. I've got to cross the street 4 times, and
yeah,
it's the new reality. But yeah, why are we doing this? Because when we're out walking, it all looks the same. So it's just knowing that. But how do kids get that? That's hard.
That's hard. Yeah, I know for us, we've tried to do family, like spend more time playing games as a family. Just basically we're like their best friends now, like that's the way I'm looking at it.
Well, and honestly, that is a unique family opportunity for this time, to create that kind of bonding and memories, honestly, for your kids. They're going to remember this.
They're going to remember this. Also, be gentle. I go to bed feeling guilty at times because it is school and it is work and it is dinner and we have more Legos on the ground. I almost had a hissy fit the other day because I tried to walk in my son's room when the light was off and I stepped on something and but then I go to bed and I feel bad because maybe we could have had more family time. And at the end of the day, everyone's doing the best that we can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Only so much time in the day.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Dr. Moran. Guys, thank you so much for hopping on. Y'all are free. Dr. Moran, stay on for just like 1 minute once everybody hops off so I can give you a huge thank you. And people are writing in the chat. Thank you. Hopefully that was helpful.
I appreciate that.
No, that was awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Everyone's popping off. Stop it. Okay. Hold on, stopping.